All right, welcome to this Supply Chain Risk APAC forum organized by the Global Supply Chain Council. My name is Max Henry. I'm going to be your host today. I'm very pleased again to have you joining us from all over Asia, but we also have people joining us from the Middle East and Europe. So again, welcome to this event. As some of you know, because we've done this event several times, this session again is going to be very interactive. We want to prioritize as much as we can your questions during the entire discussion. So if you have a question during that discussion, feel free to make use of the chat and then push your question in the chat, and then we will then take your questions as they come. This session is going to last 55 minutes. So if you have again another meeting or call starting in just an hour, no worries. We'll make sure that we close the discussion before the end of the hour. So today's topic again is all about supply chain risk management, and we have prepared a number of topics with our panelists. But again, if you have any questions, you can ask that question at any time. So let's get started, and maybe we'll start first with a round of introductions. Maybe you're starting with you, Arme. Go ahead and introduce yourself here.
Hello everyone, I'm Arme Sales from the Philippines. I'm the Vice President for Supply Chain of a local company here.
Thank you. And we have Fernando as well joining us. Welcome, Fernando.
Hello everyone, I'm Fernando. I work in Aberdeen, Scotland. I'm Professor of Procurement and Supply Chain Management.
Okay, great. We have Frank as well. Hi Frank, welcome.
Hello, welcome. And that's Frank Vorrath. I'm the Vice President of Supply Chain Services at Danfoss Climate Solutions.
Thank you. We have Rai as well. Welcome, Rai.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rai De Jesus. I'm the Chief Procurement Officer for PLDT, the largest telco company in the Philippines, and Head of Procurement for EPLDT, the largest data center company in the Philippines.
Thank you. All right, next is Refnil. Hi, welcome, Refnil. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone from Jakarta. I'm Refnil, leading of supply chain in pulp and paper industry, April Group, location in Indonesia. Good afternoon, everyone from Jakarta. Thank you.
Thanks for joining. And we have Arnav as well.
Thanks, Max. Hello, everyone. This is Arnav from India. Good afternoon. I lead digitization for supply chain of India's largest FMCG company, ITC. Thank you.
All right, thanks again for joining this discussion. Again, for some of you who are just joining, I want to remind you that this is going to be an interactive session. So if you have a question for any of the panelists, you can ask your question directly on the chat at the bottom, which is located at the bottom right corner of your screen. And again, like at any of the other events that we organize, we will prioritize your questions and take them as they come. Okay, so supply chain risk, big topic, and I would like to get started maybe with, because this is obviously on the top of the mind of many supply chain professionals today, is on the geopolitical tensions happening in the supply chain. So given the ongoing conflicts, such as what we have in Ukraine, the Middle East, or maybe the tensions between China and Taiwan, what kind of proactive strategies or practical measures do you think you can take to minimize possible disruptions based again on your own experience or what you've seen happening among companies you work with? Yeah. Anybody would like to start?
Yeah, I can take this one, Max, to start with. So I think this is a very vast topic, and I would limit myself in terms of keeping it short and directly focusing on what are the things that each of the companies do or have to do. We all understand why supply chain risk is such a big topic, and uh, we also know that we'll have to just diversify suppliers, maintain large inventories. But the problem, or why all the companies don't do it, is because of the conflicting interests. So I think it's also to understand uh, the diversity of suppliers and the suppliers and understand what are their problems and where are they based out of. One simple exercise that we do here, given that we are 15 different businesses and we have problems, are we map the supply chain on the paper, and when we did this exercise on during the COVID, we realized that supply chains are geographically very concentrated. So that gives us insights, and also understanding what is the time to react to a problem that is coming, and what is the time that we have to survive and recover, right? Mapping these three elements and kind of focusing on increasing the time to survive, thereby also getting the cost cutting opportunities, because we as supply chain managers are also owners for the cost of supply chain. So I hope I've put this forward.
Yeah, thank you, Arnav. A good point. Yeah, Frank.
Well, I can add a few things. I believe, first of all, understand your entire supply chain network. And that's probably not so easy. It's easier said than done, but you need to understand, especially upstream, your suppliers and suppliers of suppliers. So having that mapped and understanding of your potential risk areas within your supply chain from the supply side is something which is essential. Now, there's technology out there, of course, where you can also get real-time information in terms of any kind of disruptions. I think we all know the players in the market. But having a good understanding of the network is as well, because the disruption could occur in any places. If you think about it, could be not only your tier one suppliers, could be your tier two, tier three, wherever you look at. And having a full understanding and a map on that, but also a playbook in terms of various scenarios is really, really helpful. And then using technology as much as you can in terms of the situation analysis, but also the scenarios is essential. But also from an organizational point of view, my view is that we need to questioning our current organizational structures in a way if we are equipped to handle disruptions, or if we need certain to evolve in future to monitor these kind of risk areas differently. And then from when it comes from capabilities, really building key capabilities, and one of the key capabilities for supply chain professionals in future is going to be adaptability. So adaptability and adapting to any kind of situations, as we have seen in the last couple of years with the magnitude and frequency of disruptions are just increasing, and they come from any place, right? Geopolitical disruptions, any other issues we have seen, like for example in the Panama Canal, or whatever might be out there, or pandemic. But it is now a question of organizational structure, technology, but also key competencies from supply chain professionals.
Thank you, Frank. Okay. Anybody else on that? Yeah, Ame, yeah.
Yes. Well, for geopolitical tensions, no, it's so different from other disruptions because it can persist. These tensions may persist for extended periods, and we don't know when will it end. So for us, in the supply chain in the Philippines, what we do is that we go deeper. I agree that we need to map. We need to do the exercise of mapping our supply chain, but we go deeper in the sense that even the tier two, tier three, really make sure that we have good relationships with them, because we don't know what will happen in the future, and therefore, especially for our flagship brands. So we need to know where it's coming from, and from which supplier and the supplier of that supplier, so that we can identify vulnerabilities and dependencies. And from that exercise, we were able to develop new sourcing strategies to mitigate risks effectively, especially these geopolitical tensions.
Thank you. All right. Rai, Fernando, Refnil, what's your view on this here?
Yes. I'm talking about the industrial supply chains. That's we are in the last, the last step of the organization to make sure these products is reach the customer. The main point is how to keep this input and output is balanced. Yeah, this is the strong point. How we make sure the output of the product, for example, and continuously coming potentially happen from the industry. This is the strong point. And the other thing also, how we have the solution for potential risks that happen, something like we see the COVID-19, we see also the climate change lately, and also there is another impact, many thing impact of our supply chains, because we are in the last part from the production from the factory until the ready to reach the customer. For example, our industry, we deliver to 100, more than 100 countries in the world. Many things happen. Then we have to make sure the stability, I mean the output and input of this supply chain should be continuously running. This is my point. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Rai, Fernando?
So I think it's such a great time to be in supply chain in procurement, especially after COVID. So we've shown a lot of our value within the organization and how we can make things happen, from buying a simple mask to give to our employees, or to finding new solutions to be able to deliver the raw materials for our production line or for our customers. I think it's a great time to be in procurement. It's also a great time to be able to push digitalization tools within an organization, as we can always cite what we've all encountered during COVID period. So the risk and issues from a macro perspective, from a micro perspective, will always be there. So I think I would agree that identifying the right tools for supply chain would be the best way for us to mitigate any risk. And I think since we are already talking about geopolitical risk, we also have to think about how do we go past the risk? How do we be much more proactive? So how can we have tools wherein it can provide us insights using AI, using machine learning, to be able to provide new sources of information that can give us, as procurement or supply chain practitioner, more advantage when we deal with our internal stakeholders. Thank
Yeah.
you, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you, Rai. Fernando? Fernando, can you hear us?
I was muted. I
Okay.
apologize.
All right. No problem. Okay. Go ahead. Yeah.
I agree with Frank and Ray. There are lots of information about the disruptions of supply chain. It's possible to follow real time and collect data real time about what is going on. I find there is a lack of incentives for people to actually use the data they have. So companies are having way more data than they can handle, and they have very advanced models. People are using digital twins that real time track what platforms are doing, what the companies are doing, what transportation systems is doing. But going from there to actually to take actions and to understand which type of risk management strategy to implement tends to be difficult. So I also agree with Ray that AI may make this easier by being able to select the relevant information, by being able to point out what kind of factors they should be focusing. It may be easier to actually to distill all these plethora of information and help practitioners focus on the decisions they need to make.
Okay, we'll talk more about technology a little bit later in that session. We have a question already popping up, and as I said earlier, I will prioritize questions coming from all of you listening. Question is from Jeffrey. He's asking, do you use any sources to help identify scenarios that have more or less risk impact on your enterprise? Think tanks, media, other sources. Anybody?
Yeah, I can answer that. Of course, there are risk monitor technology out there, even companies giving advice, right, on the areas of risk. But like I said before, you need to really understand a lot of your own data. So I agree with Fernando on that. When you think about upstream, where your risk is. For example, if you think about your suppliers and suppliers of your suppliers, like I said before, also we need to somewhere understand the probability of certain events occurring in your supply chain network. We're coming from a time when you think about in supply chain evolutions from just in time to just in case to, like I said the other day, just I don't know. So you need to plan for that events. Now also you have to think about resilience. You have to think about what resilience means and potentially buffer against these events. So that's a hard sell. I understand that internally to sell it to, for example, your CFO. But if you somewhere, scientific can calculate the probability of, certain events, then it's probably an easier sell. But you have to do the maths in that way, and really show that if you're asking for an increase of, let's say, inventories, either on the raw material side or finished goods sides, but that's data out there. Data of in terms of transportation delays, we know that carriers are still not there on time. 65% on global levels on time performance with carriers. So you carry a certain risk. So if you just use these data points, or you being in consistent dialogue also with your suppliers, understanding their risk, and not only from a capacity point of view, but also the risk of their sourcing from their suppliers, and you use then technology in terms of mapping plus active risk monitoring, that's what you need to do.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Frank. Yeah. Arnav, yeah.
So just to add to what Frank said, I think we here at our organization have a lot of crawlers. What we do is, I'll take an example of oil, which is one of the key commodities that we purchase. There are hundreds of factors that govern the price of it, and also can lead to disruptions. So starting from how Malaysian ringgit is trading against US dollar, to as low as who are my key suppliers and where are their facilities located, right? We have more than 100 inputs given to these crawlers, and on real-time basis, uh, the news is tracked and the updates is sent to the relevant buyers. So we have about 100 odd commodities that we purchase for keeping all our factories alive, and these real-time news are being monitored and updates are being pushed. That is one aspect of it. Second is, have councils within the organization, right? We have 15 businesses and everybody is an expert in what they do. But the problem with most of the supply chains is that we operate in silos and we think we're doing the best and everybody is doing their best, but not really talking to each other. Something what we're doing today and trying to share ideas and learn from each other is something we should do more and more often, both within the organization and inter-organization. So that is one tool that we've been heavily leveraging on, and that's not only saving us from risk but also giving us cost saving opportunities. And the third is the aspect that we've already discussed, is the visibility aspect, that everybody of us would want to understand what's happening across the nodes of the chain, and the more visibility each of us have, more proactively we'll be able to kind of do our duties better.
Okay. Anybody else on those sources to help on the scenarios? Anybody has experience with that?
Yes, Max. What we are doing, something like climate change, then we can get or we could do something like consultancy or data from the another source to see what will happen for next 1 month, next 2 months, and next 6 months, for example. This for us, because we are running the company and using a lot of source as a natural source, and also road, and also the problem for port. We need to know the climate change, what happened for next week, for example. And based on this one, we can predict, we can act based on this data. It's something like for climate. But for the geopolitical, we open our eyes. What happened in the world? What happened in the news? We need to know. That's only adding from me.
But what you may wanna do is to predict any political events. but you want to know when certain things are happen very, very, very quickly. What's the impact upstream, downstream, right? And that's really when you think about the Red Sea, right? Uh, and you want to know, how many containers are in transit somewhere. What's the impact, right? What's the impact on the raw material side, potentially is running, or even on a finished goods side. So that's what you need. It's hard to predict these events when they will happen. I mean, we see a lot of science, and that's exactly where we need to act in a way of what's the probability of that it's really going to happen, but what's the impact thereafter.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else on the sources before we move to the next question? Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
Uh, I agree with Frank about the probabilities, but I think there is a major issue is that you should not pre-select the scenarios you want to look at. So in the work I'm doing about, let's say, the solar power plants and scenarios for solar power plants, we are working many years ahead and looking at scenarios for solar radiation, for electricity prices, and we don't try to pre-impose our views on the data. So we use the past data and the data about the solar radiation to forecast the future without pre-imposing. When you look at political risks, as Frank was saying, we do not have probabilities, we have ambiguity. And because you have ambiguity, you are not going to deal with any possible probabilities to assess all the scenarios you can have. So, but again, to have a way to generate all possible scenarios you can think of and not pre-impose your views is actually very important.
Okay, this is interesting. All right, so we have another question, also a pretty sensitive question. Nguyen is asking, do you have a plan B if shipping routes were cut off or disrupted due to the tensions around Taiwan and the South China Sea, obviously, and we have two persons here sitting in the Philippines who are probably being impacted more than the others. But just your quick take on this, Rai or Ame, obviously you're going for it and you know what's happening. So Ame, what's your view on this? Yeah,
Well,
do you think companies are? Yeah.
it's really a big threat for us because we rely so much on the transshipment in Taiwan, right? And if that gets cut off, then we have no recourse but to use the long route. So it will be longer shipment times for us, and that's a reality because we don't have any other means to do it. So I think
Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah. Right.
So I'll tell a story. In the Philippines, EPLDT is building the first hyperscale data center. This caters to hyperscalers, and most of our components there is being sourced from countries in Europe. So we were adversely impacted by this situation. So a couple of things that we implemented is that first we looked at alternative sources. Given that historically all of our components were shipped from Europe, can we find alternative sources within Asia or Eastern Europe? Second, can we assess the way it's being shipped? Can we look at sea versus air? Of course, air shipment would tend to be much more expensive. But the learning there is that things definitely will happen that is uncontrollable for us, to anyone. I think the most important aspect is that you have a very solid alternative sources of your product or your equipment. And then third is that continuously you try to develop other suppliers. So that area is where it becomes much more strategic in supply chain. Because you don't develop a supplier within a month or two. You don't develop a supplier when a situation happens. You develop a supplier based on your long-term supply chain or procurement strategy, identifying their relevance based on Kraljic model. Are they strategic? Are they leverage? Are they bottleneck? Are they routinary? And then from these strategic suppliers, how do you manage and create a long-term supplier relationship plan? That's it, Max.
Yeah, and Max, but let's call the white elephant in the room, right? So
Yeah.
if there would be an invasion, we all would have a problem, because if we call it semiconductors, right, and we call it TSMC, for example, there are not so many alternative sources available as yet, right? And we know that a lot of, no new factories are opening up in the next 1 or 2 years. But if it would happen right now, I think there would be such kind of big impact in terms of, the global economy, because everyone needs semiconductors, and there will be a shortage on supply. So we only can hope, that there is enough political influence on certain leaders so that it won't happen. Because if it would happen right now, like I said, the white elephant in the room is there will be a shortage, there will be a price
Yeah.
explosion, and a stoppage of many, many, many industries globally.
Okay. Yeah. That would be probably very serious problem. Fernando, sitting in Europe again and looking at what's happening in the industry, do you think that the companies uh, understand that? I mean, many of them are still very much dependent on their China sourcing and manufacturing, despite all the talks we have around de-risking and decoupling. But if there is something happening, do you think that those companies are ready for this kind of disruption?
Uh, I don't think so. I think companies try to be very efficient. Risk management costs money. Extremely risk management. Nobody wants to insurance for to buy insurance for it. So if you prepare, it's like buy insurance. If you have a big plan, it's like buy insurance, and that costs a lot of money. So from the companies I work with is that the answer is no. There is not enough resources invested in risk management in general. People try to avoid that, and they will deal with it when it gets to it. So I think it's important to be flexible and to be ready for it. But yes, I think companies will not be ready for an extreme event, and they will hope the governments will save them one way or the other.
Okay, we have maybe a follow-up question on this. So given your reliance on semiconductors, how much do supply chain consideration impact your new product design? Can lower-end chips be substituted for higher-end chips, those only available from TSMC? How does that internal conversation within your enterprise go? So anybody would like to take this? It's a pretty, maybe very focused on high tech, but interesting one indeed, yeah.
Well, I can take it again if nobody wants to take it, but I believe it's not only a question of high tech, right? If I look into the company I'm working for, everything is not just a product, is also attached to technology, and hence we also need semiconductors in our products,
Yeah,
even more going
you're
forward,
right.
right? And if you think about high tech, automotive, industrial companies, you name it, everyone is dependent on that. And we also know that a couple of years ago, where we had issues already with the supply of semiconductors out of TSMC, that was the whole reason why certain, decisions have been made. It won't be there tomorrow. I mean, it takes 3-4 years to build a new factory for semiconductors. So there will be new factories in the United States. There will be new factories in Europe, but we have to wait another 1 or 2 years before that capacity is going to be available. So it's a question of risk mitigation at any point of time. How can we hedge against that? Maybe we need to buy a little bit more if we think that semiconductors are going to be short in supply. Well, then maybe that's exactly what you need to do: buy some
Yeah.
more, put it in stock if you can.
Yeah, stock up before the crisis. Okay, that's good. Anybody else would like to comment on that question? We have another topic being asked. No, okay, all good. So let me take we have another question from Supri, who's asking, with new trade regulations and environmental laws expected in 2024, what are your key tips to stay compliant and minimize operational disruptions? So this one has to deal with environment, regulations, and laws. Anybody has experience with that and would like to comment? What is your experience dealing with all those new regulations coming? Yeah.
I'll take that, Max. So, in terms of the what we did here in the Philippines, is that we engage with regulatory authorities and industry groups. So we established communication channels with these authorities because we do not know what we don't know. So we need to know first what we don't know, and therefore these government agencies and industry associations provide guidance and clarification and assistance in understanding and complying with the new regulations. So every now and then there are new regulations, and therefore it also entails you to update your policies and procedures so that it can be aligned with the new requirements. So you have to have a regular review and update also of your internal policies and procedures.
Thank you, Ame. Yeah. Fernando, you wanted to add something? Yeah.
Yes, I think here in Europe, the environmental regulations are very strong. And for instance, what is happening in the EVs is a very good illustration of the impact. So in the UK, the government imposes quotas of the percentage of electrical vehicles the companies need to sell this year, next year, up to, I think, 2035. And they want to raise the quota up to 100%. The issue is that people do not want to buy the EVs. And so how can we impose a quota and if people do not want a product? So there is a big crisis coming. In Europe, the EVs are very expensive. People not want to buy it. We live in an age where transportation should become cheaper, and it's becoming extremely expensive. The price of transportation in Europe and the US has doubled in the last since COVID. The average price of a vehicle that people are buying has doubled. While the vehicles in China, because they have much less regulation, are way cheaper, and there is a trade war coming. So there is a political issue, a political crisis coming, created by environmental regulations. So just to summarize, we are regulating the electrical vehicles and climate issues like the Soviets used to regulate their economy. The imposing quotas about producing this and producing that. And what is happening is that companies are decreasing the sales of diesel and petrol cars so that they can raise the quota of the electrical vehicles. Otherwise, they get fined. So you need to sell less. So driving is becoming more and more expensive. So I think the destruction of the economies in Europe is being driven by really very strange choices in terms of climate policies and policies towards the conflict with Russia as well.
So you're saying that sometimes those regulations are not matching the market expectation of what companies are trying to. Yeah.
I think the regulators do not understand what the consumers want, and they are imposing consumers to buy electrical vehicles that people cannot afford. People cannot even afford, right? There is a crisis of food. There is a crisis of housing. People cannot afford electrical vehicles. Electrical vehicle costs 40,000 pounds when you can buy a petrol for half the price. So how is the government are imposing these as quotas? It just So there is a mismatch, a lack of alignment between the political climate targets and what the market is willing to accept.
Yeah, Arnav, Frank, go ahead.
Quickly chime in and add to what Fernando said. Just on the electrical vehicle bit, I think we're also short in terms of infrastructure that's needed in terms of refueling the vehicle. We need more stations, and all that to be getting up would take time. So talking about India as such, while the regulations are on, also there are a lot of work that is pending and that is happening. But majorly on the FMCG segment, I think it's about the packaging and plastic waste that is of a big concern, and the way we are shifting towards the paper-based alternatives. So it's also the teams that are working in terms of alternates for paper-based packaging, and also import of paper pulp from other countries and the supply chain involved therein. While this is happening, each of the producer is or also taking extended producer responsibility, where they're educating youth of the nation in terms of what is the impact that it could cause and how do we move towards the sustainable opportunities, and also doing the drives in terms of making that a lifestyle change, right? It's not just about the product and what is happening right now, but also how do we move towards what is envisioned.
Yeah, Frank?
Mm. But let's get a little bit more practical, because that was the question. So national protection is happening, right? We more and more into a regulatory environment. That's happening, and it's not going to go away, right? So it's a pipe dream, as I would call it, to believe it's going to go away and it's going to change in a year, 2, 3, 4. It's not going to change. So it's a question of organizational structure, competencies, and technology to be compliant, and also to make that a competitive advantage. So when you think about, centralization of certain competencies or bundling of competencies in your organization, that's, for example, what I would highly recommend, or what we have done in terms of really monitoring that from a trade compliance point of view. And then all the other regulations, like the here in Europe, the CBAM, as we would call it, the other regulations around the climate changes, but also the changing regulations about trade, right? We're gonna go into an environment where duties and taxes and everything is gonna look differently. In central resources who are being able to monitor that, making sure that's compliant, investment in a global trade system, which incorporates all these elements of reporting, but also being compliant, is recommended, right? And then you need competencies. And that means also that we will add cost to our own operations in future. But do we have a choice? No, we don't.
Yeah. Right. Do you have any, pressure again on those environment regulation in the Philippines and across Asia? Yeah.
So I'll tweak my response a little bit, because a lot of good answers has been shared already. I think from my organization, the best, and for the country, the best way to manage these particular requirements is to have a solid strategy internally. Meaning, what's your sustainability strategy? What's your corporate governance or corporate sustainability strategy? And what's better is taking it, a notch higher by integrating it within your supply chain. Where I'm heading, when you source for particular suppliers, do you assess their sustainability practice, their environmental practice? Is it part of your supplier selection criteria, or is it part of your overall supply chain criteria? So if you are able to prove that the providers or the partners that you're getting from an internal perspective to the authorities, it shows that your organization has a solid track record, solid policies and processes that can make the filing of permits or requirements much more seamless. So that's my take, Max.
Okay. Thank you very much, Rai. Okay. Anybody else on those environmental regulations before we move on? We have a lot of questions, so I want to take them again as they come. No? Okay. So let's talk about probably the next questions. This is a question from Priya Vadi, who's asking, do you, any current challenges in managing labor shortage and skill gap in your supply chain organization? That's interesting. Yeah, that's another type of risk that we don't talk enough about. Labor shortage and finding the right employees with the right skills. That's a risk too. So anybody has experience or dealing with this in your current organization? Yeah.
I'll take this, Max, because
Yeah.
I started with, it's such a great time to be in supply chain and procurement, especially post COVID. So what I'm noticing is that more and more the talent, because of globalization, the supply chain, the procurement profession becomes much more marketable. In the country, before, we usually have a lot of expats coming in to help develop supply chain in the Philippines. Now it's the other way around. talents from the Philippines is now being hired by other countries to supplement the supply chain or procurement function that's lacking in that particular country. So
Yeah.
there's a risk of what we call talent gap or talent hole, wherein the great or good or excellent supply chain professionals are being hired in other countries for, basically for greener pasture. I think, and as part of a corporate strategy, we have to recognize the value of supply chain and procurement, because without the recognition, there will be a challenge in getting a lot of support in terms of talent retention, in looking at how do we value them, in terms of monetary and non-monetary compensation. So that's one. Second, what's the value in terms of if we lose excellent talent to other organizations or to other countries? So I think to conclude, the talent is always going to be available, but you have to develop and nurture it. And what would be great or good for companies that if you get to develop a talent, is to retain them and develop further talents within supply chain. And more adapting to globalization, making much more in tune with technology, because that's going to be the next challenge for procurement and supply chain. How do we integrate the new tech in our profession? So it's not just IT, not just the technologies who should be able to be familiar with it. It's also required for procurement professional.
Yeah. Good point. Yeah. Yeah. Ame, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that from my experience, it's not actually the lack of labor, or we're not experiencing any labor shortage, because there are a lot of people who needs jobs here in the Philippines, but it's the mismatch of the required skills and the talents. Because for supply chain, for example, we need not only the technical skills but also the soft skills in order to relate to people, to customers, and be able to increase our customer service levels. So it's a challenge for us, because not all the educational system here in the Philippines does not really support supply chain. It's more of the usual uh, courses, like business courses or technical courses. But for the
Yeah.
supply chain, it's still emerging, and we really need help in really coming up with a solid educational system for it.
And especially on risk management, it requires
Yes.
a lot of knowledge and obviously a lot of skills. Yeah. I think this is a great topic. Refnil, Arnav, or Frank, or Fernando, feel free to step in and comment. Yeah, Refnil.
Yes. Talking about the talent in supply chain, for fresh, we can say fresh talent. Of course, the source of university give the new talents is not much. Yeah. Yeah, I see in many countries the more than study or a subject about the technical management and so on. But talking about the supply chains, a few university having this one. The second thing we can do through the others not coming from supply chain universities and things like a faculty, we can take from the others. The other point also, the not only to build the talents and also how to retain them, because the market now for the supply chain is growing. Every many companies is coming now. Then they want they get the good talents or only ready talents to support them. It is another issue for talents. The point now how we retain them and also how we build them. Then when we have this one, we enough for us to running the organization. This the my point about the talent in organization of supply chains. Thank you.
Thank you, Refnil. Yes. Anybody else?
And Max,
Yeah.
yeah, Max, I think we need to differentiate between, I would say, knowledge workers and operational workers. And then we also need to differentiate, about the regions or geographies. Now, when you think about from a European perspective, and I give you an example right now, operational workers or truck drivers, we know that's going to be a big issue. There's a shortage in that area, but there will be also a shortage in terms of knowledge workers, at least here in that region in Europe. It might be different in Asia, might be different over there because of the size of population you're going to have over there. But then over there, perhaps it's a question of schools, universities, investments, what needs to happen in terms of bringing up the competencies on the same levels, right? For me, I think the key question of the future is how can we tap into global available resources from an operational point of view, but also from knowledge workers, right? And how can technology play a role in that, right? The combination between technology and the human in there, or the art and the science. When we talk about knowledge workers, that needs to be uncovered. If we look into stats, so far technology hasn't really proven an increase in productivity, so that's quite disappointing. Perhaps that has something to do that we as humans don't trust the system very well enough. But from a talent point of view, we have to get to that point that we trust the system, but also somewhere developing fast our talents in a way of systems knowledge. It's not just good enough to pick it out if we have in India a lot of talents when it comes to data analytics and technology and emerging technologies like artificial intelligence and all that. If in Europe we have a shortage, it doesn't help.
Okay. Fernando? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I guess that's my area. I've been working over 25 years in creation of talent. I created programs all over the world, in Singapore and in New Zealand, and now in Scotland. One issue that we're facing is governments are disinvesting in education all over the world. In Europe is very, very clear. The Scottish and the British government are reducing their investment in education. So we are creating still students and trying to push for improvements in the way we are delivering talent, but at the cost of the students and not of the government. Same thing is happening in Singapore, where government is not financing the masters anymore. The students need to pay, and the fees are very high. So I think governments are reducing their investment in education throughout, and I think that creates a problem. There are a couple of interesting points about this. The one about RMI, the mismatch between the skills and what companies need. So we are developing some software using AI where we are reading the adverts and that companies put out there about supply chain management, try to see what are the skills that they require, and then use that to inform the students about what kind of skills are required and try to calculate actually the value of the skills. So if this advert has all these skills and pays 80,000, 100,000, 200,000, what kind of skills are common to different adverts? What is the pathway you need to develop over time? Where do your skills start, and how do you expect to develop over time to go from the basic introduction level of supply chain management jobs to go into the leadership position? And so that's the kind of work we are doing with colleagues here in the UK. But yeah, it's not easy. And then work with companies, and we try to invite companies to give talks and seminars and workshops and internship for our students as well, which is important.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, Arnav, maybe very quickly, because you're sitting in India, and obviously India is under the spotlight right now for a lot of things related to supply chain manufacturing. Lots of investment is coming to India. This is going to be the century of India for for the coming years to come. So is there do you see that mismatch? Is there a problem already among supply chain talents in India? Because obviously all those big companies are moving in, and that's going to be a problem, right?
Yeah, so I think I'll take the cues from what Frank and Fernando already spoke about and put that in India's parlance. So we'll need to really see when it comes to supply chain talent if it is a skill issue or a will issue. If it is a skill issue, you can have the entire process of upskilling, be it through universities or bringing in an external consultant and working with them, which we regularly do on factory floors. One example that I can share from the organization that I'm working in, earlier we used to have people working only on one kind of production line, but now we have one factory which is making four different product lines, and all of them are like can be used across. So when we have a demand surge on one particular variety or variant, what we do is move my skilled workers who have been trained on that line are not part of that factory but will not be moved for a temporary period, right? So that skill issue is being addressed like that. But
Yeah.
major point of it is the will issue where people are not really wanting to work for lower wages, and that seems to be a real crisis which Frank already mentioned about. And for that, what we are doing right now is bringing in technology and trying to replace all your tasks which are repetitive in nature using robots, and it has been working for us. I don't understand when Frank said uh, it's not being productive or it's not being proven productive when compared to human force. For us, we've seen that it's really working here.
Okay, good. All right, we have 5 more minutes before we wrap up this discussion. There's still a lot of topics and questions we didn't get to cover, but I want to take that question. Maybe if you want to respond to it, let's do it quickly. There's a question from Lamia who's asking, how will you plan risk over time if your company bids for projects to supply components that are 5 to 10 years long? That's an interesting question. It's on the chat if you guys want to see it. Anybody would like to respond to this? If you have any experience with this? No, I think people don't really understand your question, Lamia, so maybe you can rephrase it. That's fine. There's another question from Peter, which maybe we can take it because we talk already about technology, and he's asking, do you use tools or software to manage supply chain risk? If you do, which one do you recommend? Do you guys have any software or tools or solution that you are using specifically on supply chain risk?
Yeah, I mean, we using, for example, Everstream Analytics, right? Also, some of our customers are working with ResiLink, and
Yeah.
we,
Yeah.
of course, we some work with them as a result of that as well.
Okay, that's interesting. Refnil, Arnav?
We are using the, or we call this, we rely on the data of only something like climate monitoring. That's related to our operation. For example, we at port, we cannot do activity when there is the rainy. And we have the data to control, to check, for example, next 3 days, next 4 days, we know already what time the rain will come. Something like this. This data source we can use for our operation.
Okay,
That's
that's interesting. Thank you, Refnil. Arnav?
Yeah, specifically on the softwares that are dealing with supply chain risk, we are doing a couple of pilots. But otherwise, we do scenario planning using tools like any logistics or Blue Yonder.
Okay. Have you used those tools, software, or?
Sorry, none yet. Unfortunately, we don't use those tools.
Okay, all right. Fernando, maybe I'll get you. So we lost Rai. Denny just sent me a message that say Rai lost power with his laptop. So I don't know what he's probably. He might come back or he might not, but he's still here. He has no more power. That's all. Fernando, just your take, because I know you probably watch that space. There's been a lot of supply chain risk solution providers coming up, especially the last few years. Do you see company actually really adopting these kind of solutions in Europe or elsewhere? Yeah.
So the answer I cannot. I don't have. Actually I do not follow the space of the risk management tools development by companies. I can tell you where I work and how the universities work. So the universities also have some software they use. They are
Yeah.
working for risk management at university level, and they are not using it. So if you read the news in the UK, I think it's like 40% of universities are having extreme problems. They are going to lay off a lot of staff, and they are risk of bankrupt, like 40%. And everybody has
Wow.
exactly
Okay.
the same risk. And the risk is a political risk, first of all. and exposure to a very small number of countries where the students come from. And everybody has the same risk. They're there forever. People could see it. They did nothing about it. So the software they're using, everybody was using some software. I've been in meetings where the software was used, is completely irrelevant. The fact that people not take action is an important point. Now, the second point, yes, we use some like Refnil, some software to collect data from weather for weather stations that is publicly available. We, in general, do not purchase the software. We are a university, we cannot afford it. And then we develop our internal tool. I use Python programming for simulation. Many years ahead, using Monte Carlo simulation, event script simulation, depending on the problems. But we have many different tools that we developed throughout the years that we use to analyze supply chain risk management.
Yeah, if I can add also, I mean, it's interesting what you, because obviously you probably have some interesting solutions which are developed at a university level. There are some big solution providers out there. I've seen a lot of them kind of pushing their solution in Europe and the US, but not so much in APAC. So in Asia, we still don't see a lot of them coming. So that might change in the future. Okay. Thank you very much. I promise that you guys will be free to go before the end of the hour. So I want to keep my promise. I want to thank you again for sharing your insight, for joining us. We lost Rai, but Rai is probably thinking about us. So I want to thank Rai, even if he's not here, for sharing his insight. Thank you, Fernando. Thank you, Frank. Thank you, Arme, Refnil, and Arnav for joining again. We didn't get to cover a lot of topics that we prepared, so that's okay. We will do another session in a few months or a few weeks from now. So stay tuned. We'll announce a new time for another supply chain risk forum or roundtable. So thanks again for listening, and we'll again see you next time. Again, if you want to watch or rewatch the recording, we'll be sharing the link to that recording to all of you after the event. We'll also have some highlight clips on social media. And if you want to continue discussion, as some of you might know already, we have a group on WhatsApp on supply chain risk that you guys can join at any time, and you can continue asking questions. And we'll make sure also that the speakers and panelists of today are within the group. So if you want to get to know them and continue asking questions to them, you can do so on WhatsApp. Thank you very much, guys, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.